March of 2023, a young captain stood before his nation and made an announcement so daring, so unexpected, that even his closest advisors thought he had lost his senses. Captain Ibrahim Traoré declared that Burkina Faso, one of the driest lands on earth, would plant 5 million grapevines along the desert's edge, where the sands of the Sahara slowly devoured the Sahel. Grapes here? In a place where rainfall barely reached 600 millimeters a year? The idea sounded impossible. The nation listened in disbelief and the world smirked. Yet Traoré stood tall, eyes unwavering, voice steady. He spoke not as a dreamer, but as a man at war, with drought, dependency, and despair. For decades, the Sahara had crept south, swallowing farms, driving families to hunger, forcing entire villages to abandon their homes. International aid had come and gone, leaving little behind but broken promises. So when Traoré spoke of vines, he wasn't simply talking about fruit. He was speaking of defiance. He told his people, if we can grow grapes here, we can grow anything. To many, it sounded like a fable. To others, a challenge worth accepting. Within weeks, the order was given. Soldiers, farmers, and students across the country began preparing the soil. Convoys of trucks moved through parched highways, carrying small saplings wrapped in moist cloth. The operation was named the Green Frontier. The reasoning behind grapes was strategic, even poetic. Grapes, unlike many crops, can survive where others fail. Their roots dive deep, reaching hidden moisture. Their leaves, broad and light-colored, reflect heat. And their fruit, sweet, resilient, and valuable, symbolized something greater: transformation. A crop once seen as luxury would become the emblem of self-reliance. Traoré's message spread across radio stations and mobile networks. Burkina Faso will not wait for rain. We will call it forth with our hands. What began as an order soon turned into a movement. In the northern provinces, schools gave students 1 vine each to care for. In the west, elders gathered children and taught them old watering techniques long forgotten. The military became both protector and gardener, patrolling the new plantations as if guarding a national treasure. By the end of the first month, the horizon had changed. Tiny green dots lined the dunes where nothing had lived before. People began to whisper that maybe, just maybe, this madness had a plan. The scent of wet soil after the first light rains mixed with the laughter of children carrying buckets. Hope, for the first time in years, began to smell like life. But hope is fragile, and so are vines. By midsummer, disaster struck. The imported irrigation systems, donated by foreign contractors, began to fail. Pipes cracked in the heat. Pumps rusted under sandstorms. The vines withered, their tender stems curling beneath the harsh sun. What had been called the Green Frontier was turning brown again. Critics pounced. "We told you it was a fantasy," they said. "Burkina Faso cannot fight the desert." For a moment, it seemed they were right. Satellite images showed dying patches where once soldiers had celebrated victory. The world turned its gaze elsewhere. But the people of Burkina Faso did not. They refused to let the dream die. Across villages, farmers began experimenting. They replaced the foreign drip systems with something ancient: clay pot irrigation. Buried earthen jars slowly leaked water into the roots, using just a fraction of what the pumps had wasted. It worked. Within months, new green shoots emerged. The vines bent but didn't break. Word spread again, this time not of Traoré's speeches but of the people's wisdom. Reporters from neighboring countries arrived, astonished to see grapes hanging from vines in the Sahel sun. Photos flooded social media. Children eating fresh grapes under the shade of leaves where, only a year ago, there had been nothing but dust. The success carried symbolism deeper than agriculture. Grapes became a metaphor for sovereignty. Burkina Faso was no longer waiting for foreign aid packages or imported wheat. It was producing something with value, something no one thought possible. The same soil that once grew dependence was now growing defiance. Women's cooperatives formed across the central regions. They began producing grape juice, raisins, even wine for export. "If our men can fight for the land," one woman said, "we can feed from it." The vines gave more than fruit. They gave ownership. Still, beneath the celebration, there lingered unease. Not everyone wanted a self-sufficient Burkina Faso. Foreign investors, seeing potential profit, began to circle the project. Offers came: money, technology, infrastructure, but with conditions. Traoré refused most of them. "We will not trade our roots for machinery," he said in a televised address. The applause was thunderous, but behind closed doors, ministers worried about isolation. In interviews, villagers spoke of mixed feelings. "We are proud," one farmer said, "but the vines are like our children. They need constant care. If we fail them, they die." And so, even amid triumph, there was tension between pride and pressure, sovereignty and survival. Yet the captain pressed on. He visited the vineyards personally, walking barefoot through the rows, touching the leaves as if reading a language of resilience. Cameras followed him as he kneeled in the soil, whispering prayers or perhaps promises. The image of a soldier tending vines went viral. And for once, Burkina Faso was trending not for war or hunger, but for creation. By the close of 2024, more than half the vines had reached maturity. Entire regions were carpeted in green. The air carried a faint sweetness that locals said reminded them of old times, when the land still had rhythm and smell. Children who once chased locusts now carried baskets of fruit. It was not a miracle. It was labor, faith, and stubborn belief that something beautiful could grow even in the hardest of places. Still, as the world applauded, new questions rose like shadows. Would the vines survive another dry season? Would politics or greed undo what faith had built? No one knew. But for the first time in a generation, Burkina Faso had become a symbol, not of suffering, but of struggle turned into strength. And somewhere in the heart of the Sahel, under the wide African sky, a young captain stood once more, looking across the green line where the desert had stopped. He didn't smile, not fully. He knew the fight was not over. But he also knew this: the sands were no longer advancing. The vines were. By early 2025, Burkina Faso's experiment had become one of the most discussed environmental projects on the continent. What began as a bold gamble by a young captain had evolved into a living movement, a national story written in green across the sand. The grapevines now stretched for hundreds of kilometers, weaving through villages that had once stood on the edge of extinction. The desert, which had crept south for decades, seemed to hesitate at the border of this new life. Foreign journalists arrived by the dozens. Some came searching for a miracle. Others came hunting for proof of failure. But what they found was something far more complex: a people who had stopped waiting for help. A teacher from Ouahigouya told one reporter, "This is not just agriculture. This is our way of saying we exist, and we can feed ourselves." His words echoed across international news segments. Burkina Faso, once dismissed as a land of scarcity, was now being spoken of with respect. Yet not everything was triumph. The vines brought prosperity, but they also brought new kinds of conflict. The success attracted attention, and attention brought competition. Regional power brokers began claiming credit. Some demanded that the project be privatized, arguing it could attract global investors. Others feared it would slip into foreign control, erasing the very independence it had come to represent. Inside the presidential compound, debates grew heated. Advisors warned Traoré that the project was outgrowing government management. International companies were offering millions for a stake. The French, the Chinese, the Turks all offered deals wrapped in diplomacy. Each promised efficiency, export systems, and technology. But every promise came with ownership strings. Traoré remained unmoved. "If we sell the vines," he said, "we sell the story. And if we sell the story, we sell the future." His words became a rallying cry, painted on school walls and banners across cities. Yet his defiance came with a cost. Economic pressure mounted. Aid agencies quietly withdrew funding. Loans were delayed. Burkina Faso was being reminded, subtly but unmistakably, that independence has a price. Still, the people refused to retreat. Across the countryside, cooperatives multiplied. Women began leading most of them, managing harvests, pressing grapes into juice, and organizing local markets. Many of these women had never handled money before. Now they were running entire trade routes. One cooperative leader said in an interview, "Before, we waited for husbands to bring food. Now we feed our homes, and our husbands too." The laughter that followed wasn't just humor. It was pride. Soon, the neighboring nations began to notice. Mali sent a delegation of agricultural officers. Niger and Chad followed. Within months, the Green Frontier model was being studied in regional conferences. A few even started their own pilot vineyards using Burkina Faso's clay pot irrigation method. What had begun as one nation's rebellion was turning into a continental blueprint. International reactions were mixed. Western analysts labeled it the Grape Gambit. Some praised it as Africa's new ecological awakening. Others called it unsustainable populism. But on the ground, the vines kept growing, quietly, steadily, ignoring the noise. Nature didn't argue. It simply responded. By the middle of 2025, the first official harvest festival was held in Ouagadougou. Thousands gathered to witness it. Music filled the air. The first batch of local grape wine was unveiled under the brand name Terroir du Faso, the soil of Faso. It wasn't about luxury. It was about legacy. Cameras captured images of Traoré holding up a single bottle, the label simple and proud. "This," he said, "is not just wine. It is proof that faith can bear fruit." The world watched. Social media exploded. Young Africans from Senegal to Kenya began using hashtags like Grow Like Faso and Desert No More. The idea of turning desolation into abundance had become contagious. Environmental groups began quoting Burkina Faso's story in conferences and documentaries. It had transcended its borders. It had become a symbol of possibility. But behind the celebrations, the challenges persisted. The desert still waited, patient and silent. Climate shifts were unpredictable. Rainfall decreased again in the following season, and several northern vineyards suffered heavy losses. Critics re-emerged, predicting collapse. Some investors pulled out. Traoré, however, refused to frame the setback as failure. "If some vines die," he said, "we learn. The desert has taught us patience." His calm tone carried the weight of experience, not arrogance, but endurance. As months passed, the vines adapted once again. Local farmers began experimenting with mixed cultivation, interplanting grapes with native shrubs to reduce soil evaporation. The land itself seemed to be learning alongside its people. A quiet rhythm emerged between human effort and natural resilience, a partnership that defied statistics and skepticism alike. Documentary filmmakers began capturing this evolution. Drones flew over vast green belts, cutting through ochre landscapes. In their footage, the contrast was breathtaking, a living scar of hope across a dying world. One narrator in a European broadcast put it perfectly: "They planted faith, and faith took root." The grapes changed more than the soil. They changed the national psyche. For generations, the people of Burkina Faso had been told that their land could only take, never give. Now they had proof that it could bloom, not through foreign miracles, but through their own hands. Pride replaced pity. That was perhaps the project's greatest harvest. Still, Traoré himself remained cautious. In private meetings, he warned his cabinet, "A vine is fragile. It grows strong only when pruned." His metaphor wasn't lost on them. He knew that power, like a vineyard, must be tended carefully. Too much control could choke growth. Too little could let chaos spread. By late 2025, the project reached an inflection point. Satellite images from NASA confirmed that desertification in parts of northern Burkina Faso had slowed by 18%, a number small to outsiders, but enormous to those who had lived under the shadow of sandstorms for decades. For the first time in living memory, villagers watched grass return to old fields. Wells began to refill. Migratory birds came back. In the evenings, when the air cooled, elders gathered beneath the vines, telling stories of how it began: the disbelief, the struggle, the failures, and the revival. Children listened, chewing sweet grapes as if tasting history itself. They would grow up believing that their homeland could fight back. That belief, perhaps more than any crop, was Traoré's true legacy, and so the story remains unfinished. The vines still stretch across the horizon, their leaves trembling in the desert wind, a fragile promise between man and nature. No one knows how long they will last, or what new trials will come. But the attempt itself has already changed something fundamental. Burkina Faso, once defined by drought and despair, now carries a different name in whispers across Africa. It is called the land that dared. And on the edge of the Sahara, where sand once swallowed every sign of life, the wind now carries the faint, sweet scent of grapes, a reminder that even in the harshest soil, dreams can take root if someone dares to plant them.